So thank you everyone for joining us. This is for GDG Cloud LA International Women's Day, and I have Krystal Scott here of the Well, and we're gonna just chat a little bit about her journey and how she got here as our feature series for International Women's Day 2022. So, Krystal, tell me, how'd you get here?
Hi. Oh boy, what a question. Yeah, so well, like you said, my name is Krystal, and I'm the founder of the Well. Actually, on April 1, we will be rebranding. So our name is changing to MINO. Um, Keep that between us until April 1st, but we
Nice.
are going through a whole change. Yeah. And MINO is a member-driven platform. We prepare Black women to lead, and our mission is to prepare, equip, and support Black women on their journey to the C-suite. So how I got here is actually like a really good reflection question because I started the Well 4 years ago this month, March. So March 2018. And when I started the Well, we were a social club for creative and entrepreneurial Black women. Um, I almost had, this idea that we were going to be like an AI company. We're going to build an AI that would connect Black women to each other, similar to the way that like a little like the donut runs on Slack. If you've ever seen that partnership.
Mhm.
So that's the company I thought we were going to build. Like, we're going to have a co-working space, and then we're going to launch into tech and be like an AI company. Then neither of those things happened, clearly, as I just mentioned, where our focus is very different. But it is fun to kind of look back and be like, wow, lots changed in 4 years.
Mhm.
So how I got here, so what actually made me start the company back then was actually a really pivotal incident that happened at work. It happened while I was on the clock, not at my office. But it made me hyper aware of just how alone I was in these rooms as a Black woman. And I just really wanted to create a space where I knew I wasn't going to be the only one anymore. And I'd heard from enough Black women that like being the only one seems to be something that we share,
Mhm.
particularly in like corporate spaces. Um, and so, we had a really good run, 2018 to about 2020. We had a ton of events in New York City. We actually
Mhm.
were also virtual before the world had to be. And then two things kind of slowed us down. The first was in 2019, I got pregnant, which for most people, it's like, well, why did that slow you down? But my pregnancies are wild. So I was like, just kind of sidelined for a bit and did not have a full team or anything like that. So it was, for the most part, kind of just me and whatever help I could kind of scrounge up, and bless the people that have helped us on our journey, like especially back then. Um, and so that was our first kind of thing. And then the pandemic, right? So March 2020, I actually started working at a venture-backed company. It was the 40th hire. My first day was March 9th. 4 days later, on March 13th, I'll never forget it, Friday the 13th, New York City shut down. So here I was back in a corporate setting for the first time since I started the Well, actually. Like, that same incident that made me start the Well was actually the incident that kind of pushed me out of corporate for America, made America
Mhm.
for a minute, and had me take a break, right? So I'm back in this space for the first time in like 3 years, and what a year, right? So between the pandemic, the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, um, racial unrest that summer, then corporate posturing and pandering that fall. It was just like all of that
Mhm.
emotion. And then I'm also trying to work from home with a preschooler and a newborn. So it became very clear to me that like capitalism, corporate America is just like really not set up for most people to succeed, but especially not Black women. And so at the same time, though, it actually seemed like pretty hopeless that like the only option it seemed for Black women was just like bow out, right? So like
Mhm.
we're all founders talking here today, or aspiring founders for the most part, but there are Black women who don't want to run a company, right? They want to be the VP of global communications somewhere. They want to be managing director at
Right.
like BlackRock, or the CEO of an investment bank. They want to be a provost at a university. So for Black women who are already underrepresented and undervalued in corporate America, where are we supposed to go for like that leadership development that we need to stay sharp?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go to build our confidence when we can't like look to our left or our right, necessarily see other Black women who are in these roles, right? Where do we go when we need to vent about how our manager got something wrong, or how we really wanted to turn up on old girl today? And when do we
Mm-hmm.
just, like,
Say
who
that.
is helping us kind of navigate this corporate landscape, manage tough workplace environments, and in a way that's really authentic and culturally like competent and relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, and I've been thinking a lot about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, and as she mentioned, like during her hearing about being at Harvard, and that advice she received and would give even today, right, about perseverance, and in the
Mm-hmm.
face of it all, just like persevere, right? So where do Black women go to find the strength to persevere at work? And so these are the questions that we were battling in 2020. My team and I, all of us were working in corporate America as we were building the well. I brought my team on in May of 2020. They're with me even to this day. And we really saw this as an opportunity to pivot and solve this problem for Black women at work. And so what was the well, this social club idea for Black women, became MINO. And we aim to be champions for Black women at work, doing the advocacy, the activism, the ministry necessary to help Black women truly persevere and become the
Mm.
leaders that they want to be.
Mm. Wow. Wow. That's an amazing journey. Just that part.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's great. I think it's great finally that our stories are being told broadly in public, globally, of
Yeah.
like who we are and what we need, even though like watching Dr. Jackson, I mean, Judge Jackson go through all of that just to show it, right? Like the
Hmm.
difference
Hmm.
between like what Anita Hill was going through and what she's going through, which wasn't really that different actually.
Right. Exactly.
And the legacy of that, and how like no matter where you go, like somehow there's always like as a Black woman, there's always like some sexualization issue going on like everywhere we go because of the history of slavery, like white men can't help but keep doing that thing. It's so interesting. Like I think that whole those last couple days this week will be talked about for a very long time
Oh yeah.
because
Absolutely.
there were so many layers of every. I mean, it's like, and it was funny because someone was saying, "What's wrong with them?" Like another white person was saying, "What's wrong with them racially? Like why did?" And I said, "They can't help themselves. They're racist, and you're challenging their sense of power. It is a reptilian survival response. Their response it defies their own logic, their own status in society, or whatever.
Hmm.
When once it's triggered, that's it, and they have to do it, even if they look completely idiotic, foolish, crazy, murderous. It doesn't matter because they racism says it's us or them. So they're going to go through whatever their elimination program, however they think they can eliminate us or diminish us or kill us, they will.
Well, yay.
Yeah, even
Yay.
if they're
Mhm.
really sorry later,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
Because it is a survival program, right? So
Yeah.
it's really
Absolutely.
interesting. I'm just thankful that we can have that loud, and then your business says we can have those conversations out loud. So thank
Yeah.
you.
And
As a Black woman, I say thank you for that.
oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
So what is the response you have from your customers? How do you there's this traditional validating your market. How are you validating your market in this case? Because some people go, well, is that a business or is that like social work? Right.
Yeah.
So how is that how do you answer those questions?
Right. I feel like, well, one, I would say social impact is a huge business for better or worse. Right. And I think we have to put that, to the side. Say like that is kind of like what it is, especially right now.
It is a business, yes.
It is a business. And there's a lot of good work that's being done. I remember, when I first started talking to investors, not necessarily to raise, but just to have like conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Many of them asked why we were set up as a for-profit and not a nonprofit. And for me, it's a matter of like wealth generation, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
one, um, the for-profit business model gives you an opportunity to have investors, which then allows for people to share in the work that you've done. For me, those investors happen to be friends and family. I was fortunate enough to raise a friends and family round that I'll close at the end of April.
Mm.
And it is such a wonderful opportunity to be able to say, I do work for Black women, and that work also is rewarding my Black family and friends, and some non-Black allies and
That's
friends
great.
who, support me in this vision as well. Um, so yeah, it's definitely a business. It's definitely a company, and the response has been great. Like we soft launched in October of last year. We have 21 members right now. Um, More than half of them work in for-profit companies themselves, right? And so I think it's also really important to remember that like Black women want to be in these spaces. We want to become leaders in these spaces. We want to change the way that corporate leadership looks and behaves.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really just building on the work that those who have come before us have done, right? And so it's been a really great response from our members. These are women who range from like just starting out in their career to like very new VPs. And so this is an opportunity for them to have coaching, which is usually not even offered until you get to be a senior leader. And then it's like, well, let's get you a coach. Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
Now you're entitled with all this money. Let's get your coach.
Right. So I think introducing coaching earlier has had such an amazing impact on our members. Our coaches are
Mm.
also Black women. So there is an understanding of the environment, how Black women are perceived in the environment, and a way for our coaches to actually talk to women about how to navigate corporate America and then also constructive responses to it so that they don't get frustrated and leave corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the end of the day, there's no equity in corporate leadership, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you kind of think about it, Black women are 7% of the US population. We are two Fortune 500 CEOs right now, right? For a long time, we were zero. We had Ursula Burns before that, and then we were zero before that.
Mm-hmm.
So right now with Roz Brewer and T. Duckett, it's two. To get to 7%, we would need 33 more Black women to be
Mm.
Fortune 500 CEOs. Like that's the gap we're talking about in terms of what's happening in corporate and like our actual representation here. And so that's our big vision. Like that's why we exist. We really want to manifest this world where Black women actually do hold 7% of corporate leadership roles, 7% of Fortune 500 CEOs, 7% of VPs, 7% of other C-level leaders, and 7% of corporate board representation. And
Mm.
so, again, we're doing it through building the confidence of our members and helping them to really like persevere and feel like they have a safe space where they can vent and talk and learn and then get back in the trenches and go to work and
Mm-hmm.
get the role that they want, and also working alongside companies to ensure that there's space for these highly developed, highly skilled Black women to actually serve. Um, and so it's hard. I mean, it's a system that's entrenched in keeping us out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's mired in fear and lack, and kind of going up against those things is difficult. We are definitely just like coming alongside all of the Black women and ally activists and leaders who have made, even having T. Duckett and Roz Brewer in those positions possible.
Mm-hmm.
This is just like our small way of adding to that and being champions for Black women.
Yeah, that's awesome. So man, yeah, I was like, there's so many different directions I can ask you questions. Oh, like wait. I won't be too selfish here. I'll start with the basics.
Sure.
So tell me about your early years. How did you become you? What was the journey like for you?
Like human me. um,
Yeah.
so it's funny. I uh, have always really identified with advocacy and I think lending a voice to others as well as entrepreneurship. So I've always been working also. There's that. So my first like business, I was in the fifth grade, and my dad's an artist. I actually, especially when I was younger, did a pretty decent job of drawing myself. I would draw pictures for friends and sell them, or I would take a marker and like draw on their hands and like draw little tattoos for them. That was kind of like my first introduction to entrepreneurship. My father's also always been an entrepreneur. I don't really know of living in a house with him where he didn't own his own business.
Mhm.
Um, so having your own business was pretty normalized in our house.
Mhm.
I sold candy illegally in school. Went to public school, you're not supposed to do that, but did that. Played the piano for churches and made a little money that way. So I've always been like working, making a little bit of money, and always like doing that kind of like hustle thing. Um, and then when I got to college, I got really interested in community service. And so taking, I think this entrepreneurialism and this like desire to lead and build things, we actually launched, me and a couple of my friends, a organization, a school club that was focused on community organizing and community service
Mhm.
for the Black side of our neighborhood. So I went to a predominantly white institution, the University of Florida, and the school is basically split as many of these, especially southern, college towns are. You have a white side and a black side. The white side, the school's on that side, and then there's like the other side that no one really talks about, goes to. And we focused all of our efforts over there. We called it Give Black. And when I left, it was still like going, and other people had come in and taken it over, and it was awesome. I also like organized a march when I was in college. Like this has like always been kind of a part of me. I moved into public health, went to DC, lobbied the government for on behalf of communities of color and low-income communities and communities or people with disabilities, living with disabilities, right when President Obama was starting his first term. So, I was there in the heyday of health reform, um, 24 years old, 25 years old, writing like paragraphs and policy and things that actually make it into the legislation, which was awesome. And then also living with the fact that, okay, you're a Black woman in these spaces and I'm competent and have proven myself already, and still feeling like, well, when I visit Republican offices, I have to be very conservative and wear my hair pulled back and my hair can't be out. I have very natural curly hair. Just these
Mhm.
little tiny things that I don't think we really appreciated how much they impacted us as Black women and how we perceived ourselves at work until recently. Now, as you were saying, like we're just talking about it a lot more. And there's so many days I go on LinkedIn and I see a Black woman posting her like her headshot with her
Mhm.
natural hair out, and then this long post about how like for years she never felt like she could do it until now. It's like things like this that seem so small, but
Mhm.
I think we're really experiencing a moment where Black women, we're shifting the status quo into a certain direction, and at the same time, because of a lot of the unfortunate things that have happened, particularly in 2020, and just outright deaths of Black people, I think companies are listening in a way they haven't before. And so this is really an interesting time to like not only just to be alive, but to be working on these issues, to be um, working on behalf of Black women, because I think it's in vogue to look like you are in support of Black women now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so we're taking advantage of the of the situation and
Of the moment,
running with
yeah.
it. Absolutely, I think that's an important part of being a founder is being able to look at the environment and the landscape and know like when's your time and to really like take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there has been a very distinctive shift. I can tell you, as a person who's been in business for 30 years,
Woof.
and seeing the things that gone on. I was just thinking back as you were talking, and I was like, how, what, my comfort level. I made a vow never to get straighten my hair again when I was 19 years old
Mm,
because as I was saying to you before we started, being a multiracial person, my mother didn't know what to do with my hair, so she straightened it eventually
right.
because it was just easier for her to deal with, and she didn't want to, outsource it to her little sister who's mostly black.
Right.
So her sister understood. Her sister was like, "It's not a mystery. Like, here's how you do it." And my mom was just like, "No, it's a mystery." And it was funny because it's like, yeah, my mom had cultural differences even with her own sister, being a mostly white multiracial person, right? So it was funny to that, yeah, hair is such a big deal. And then, with the Crown Act, and Holly Mitchell came from LA. So we heard about the Crown Act first, right?
Mm,
And when she passed it, I was like, I cannot believe that's a thing,
right.
right? Because I had started in the entertainment business, and for all its flaws, you are able to be yourself. You're able to be your kooky, wild self in entertainment, and that includes your hair. If you consider that kooky, but nobody, there was never a discussion about my hair in the
Right.
entertainment business. And I just thought, oh wow, that's a discussion in corporate America. And then I'm like, in 2022, I'm like, that is still a discussion.
Still.
That is crazy. Because in LA, it's sort of like not a discussion. And then when I started to venture out a little bit outside of LA, I saw that I was like, oh, this is a discussion. It was amazing. It was just amazing to me because it's just like, wow, we still just talking about, it's just hair. It's our hair. It's what comes out our head. We can't help it. That's how it is. And we're talking about it like it's still a thing, and it was amazing because I had left that role behind in 1993.
Right.
Right. And I
Right.
just thought everybody else left it behind. In my mind, everybody else had left it behind. And, it was a choice if you were doing that. But I realized it was not a choice for a lot of people.
No, no. And I think when I get to DC, yeah, 2008. And even in 2008, um, a lot of Black women who were going up to the Hill or who had, Hill positions, depending on the office you were in, that hair was either straightened or if it wasn't, it was pulled back. Um, you know, being conservative in appearance was still like kind of the name of the game.
Hmm.
New York for being, very interesting and vibrant, depending on the industry you're in, right? Finance is huge here. So there's still like pockets where um, professionalism for Black women is is a conversation that I people who aren't Black women just don't really understand, right? What that means for us and how triggering that term can be,
Hmm.
or this idea of things like executive presence, stuff like that, because they seem to conflict directly with just our being. Um, and that's another thing that we, coach around at MINO is like having that space for the discussion, right? Like,
Hmm.
let's talk about the fact that this is how you could potentially be perceived. Let's talk about how to navigate that and let's have these open discussions, right? And then let's give you some boldness to where you can express yourself how you want and feel confident in doing that, and know that you have some people who have your back, right? If you do want to wear your curly hair to work, right? So, um, yeah, even in 2022, there's definitely a need for this, which is um, unfortunate, but I'm really glad to be part of the solution for sure.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. In terms of the future or even the present, what gives you the most hope?
Ooh, what gives me hope? I'm just gonna come back to, yeah, back to the judge. I mean, it's really just like our sheer will to persevere, right? In the sense that, unlike any other time in history, we really do seem to have the world's attention. So that makes me pretty hopeful. Also, Gen Z as well. As a millennial, Gen Z sometimes like I don't understand what they're doing, and at the same time, I'm also really inspired by the way they approach certain things and the way that that generation seems to be like shaping up. Um, it'll be interesting to see how they end up impacting corporate America and what does corporate America look like once Gen Z gets there.
Mhm.
So I'm really hopeful about that because I don't think they'll approach it the same way we have. I think they're going to have their own like version of progress. So that's good to see. Um, and so yeah, I think also um, little things like my daughter and her experience in school and acceptance of herself is very different than mine was like at 5. She is aware and unaware of her race in a way that I was not. And so that gives me hope as well. So um, yeah, like when I was coming up, as far as like representation of other Black girls on TV, things like that, not as much as there is for her now. When she draws pictures, the first color she reaches for is that brown crayon, and it's just like very normal and natural for her to embrace herself because I think because she sees it, she sees herself a lot more, and people don't understand how important that representation really is. And we have to see ourselves. In many cases, you have to see it in order to like believe that you can achieve it and believe that um, it's possible. And so, we definitely need that, and that's why I think that's a huge part of the reason why for us, like seeing Black women at least hit right 7% in these different breakdowns of corporate leadership is so important to us.
Mhm. That's awesome. I have one interesting thing that I just read recently because I'm part of a women in tech group, a sister circle. Right, I don't know if you've
Mm,
heard of them,
I just
and
joined them on LinkedIn. Yeah.
they're amazing. It's really active on Facebook, so it's really amazing because there's this moment where everybody can say, "Am I crazy? Like this happened." And am I crazy? Like, what's going on? They're like, no, girl, that's not crazy. Or sometimes they'll go, this recruiter asked for this. Is that normal, or is it because I'm Black? Like, what's going on? And then some people be like, no, that's totally normal, girl. Like, that's how it is, and or whatever. And it's so refreshing because it's like it's the like always the question of, am I crazy?
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
should I go after this person, or should I reject it, or
Exactly.
should
Exactly.
I what should like everybody just can say, or some of the younger ones will go, I can't find a job. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. How do I do this right? Or and then somebody in a big company will say, oh girl, we have an internship program here. Let me get you in
Love
or
that.
whatever. And it's so nice, right? It's
Hmm.
just like a
Hmm. Yep.
okay. We're gonna have this conversation. But one of the things that was posted in there was from Ursula Burns.
Hmm.
And she said, you don't have to go to all your kids' games for the work life balance.
Okay.
Yeah. And I went, okay. Exactly that, right? It says the pressure of having it all is still alive and well. And Ursula Burns, who became the first Black woman CEO of a Fortune 500 company in 2009, says she relied on her husband, Lloyd Bean, to help take care of the children and missing activities for work while scaling the corporate ladder. And she credits her success to that strategy. So, what do you
Yeah,
say to all of that? Because that's a load. That's a load. Just that.
it is. And what I will say, I can actually tie this back to the question you asked before about what gives me hope, is that I think women post pandemic um, have a lot more now tangible examples that people can see of why there is such a struggle in terms of pursuing career ambition and also wanting to show up for your family in the way that you desire, right? I think first and foremost, and this is something I think a lot of feminists get wrong, is you are, as a woman, you have the agency to decide how you're going to toe that line, right? So that's what feminism was supposed to do, is make it so that you as a woman now you have the choice to have kids, not have kids, pursue career, or if you're going to pursue career, like, well, you're going to be the one that does it and you'll be the breadwinner and your husband will take care of it. So there are all of these variations now, and women can choose how they want to navigate it. And so I think what gives me hope is that I think people are now realizing, like, oh, this must be really difficult to do if we're not paying you enough so you can have childcare. Oh, this must be
Yeah,
really difficult to
that.
do if we're requiring you to be at the office 70 hours a week. Yeah, if I'm going to be at the office 70 hours a week, it's going to be really hard for me to do these kids games. And if I want to go to the kids games, I'm going to have to scale back at work. And so we need to have these conversations, right? And I think we can do that more effectively because of the pandemic. Because the pandemic squeezed everybody, not just women.
Yeah, that's true.
Men felt it too. Fathers felt it too.
Yeah.
And so, for better or for worse, I think they needed to kind of like feel the squeeze themselves to realize, like, oh man, this is actually really bad. This is bad. And so, yeah, I have hope that changes. I think is more, and we need more women in positions of power in order for I don't like power, positions of leadership in order for that to change. So when we have more Black women, more mothers, more women in general who are the CEO and the CFO, and a they can model a work-life balance, right? That
Hmm.
is more conducive to doing some of these family things that women, other parents may want to do, then I think it's less that you're missing your kid's game. And it's more like, no, I went to my kid's game and I worked from home that day instead so that I didn't have to commute all the way over to her school. You know what I mean? I think we
Yeah,
end
yeah,
up, um, part of the future of work is that I hope, and I'm hopeful about this, that there's more humanity in work. And I hope that it's modeled more from the top down because we have a more diverse leadership.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think also it can't be that money is not everything, right?
Mhm.
It's like you have to pause and have it be a certain way, um, because you need to breathe and you need to be sane and you need to meditate and you need to talk to your kids and talk to your husband, all of that stuff. I think that's finally, I think you're right. There's is that humanity started going there. And, even people are talking about, workers unionizing because they want humanity injected into their workplace. And
Mhm, mhm.
there are a lot of movements that are I think, very hopeful. I think you're completely right. There's a lot of different things sort of percolating.
Yeah,
And then there's the people that are fighting that. So it's
right.
interesting. It's very interesting, but it's amazing that you're building a space for that to happen. And then my very last question for you is,
Sure.
who are you most inspired by? Who's your hero, or who are your heroines?
Oh my,
I know that's always a big question. I could talk all
always.
day about it.
Who are my heroines? Um, People always talk about like, oh, my mom, but truly, I will say like, yeah, my mom really is one of mine. When so my mother didn't work outside of the home until I was 11 years old.
Mm.
And just for some backstory, so I'm from a family of Jamaican immigrants, and this isn't every Jamaican family, but some Jamaican families have a very patriarchal structure, right? And um, it didn't go over great when my mother decided that, we were old enough for her to she wanted to go to work and get a job. And um, seeing her work, I think, I don't know how I would have grown up if she had stayed at home my entire, childhood and hadn't had that shift. I really don't.
Mhm.
Because it normalized the idea of going to work, of having things that weren't just like at home, of being in a corporate space. So she's not an entrepreneur like my dad was. She actually went into an office um, and enjoyed it and was ambitious and wanted to get promoted and did, and turned
That's it.
down promotions she didn't like. And so seeing that energy um, was was awesome, especially for someone who, my mother's not a college graduate, but she kind of created this life for herself because she wanted to, right? And so for me, that's super inspiring. um I don't know how you feel about this, Marie, but sometimes I feel like we over encourage Black women to like bow out of corporate and go start a business,
Mhm.
go raise some money. And it's like, maybe, and also maybe not. And that's fine too.
Yeah,
And
I
I
know
think
my family's like, and now there's just like little splinters. Now I have little cousins, and I call them little, but they're in their 30s. But they're now, I can see, there's a few of them where they're like, yeah, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna do this entrepreneurial thing,
yeah. And
and yeah, when I was doing it, and I'm like, 20 years or senior, I was like the alien in the family, right? And still am to a certain degree. I mean, now, I don't think so. I don't think anybody thinks so now. But at the time, up until recently, probably like up until 5 years ago, 7 years ago was when we started Day 360. It was like a foreign territory for 99.9% of people.
yeah, and now I feel like the pendulum is swung almost completely the other way. Like whenever
The
I look
other
through a news
way, yeah,
article,
everybody's like,
yeah,
"Do
it's
it,
like
girl, go." I'm like, "What?"
I feel like we need a little bit more balance in the
Yeah, it's like, well,
conversation.
that's not made for everybody. Yeah, my sister's like, no, I'm not doing it. But
Exactly.
it's funny. You never know. It's like,
Right, right. And so
yeah,
just I think creating space for Black women to be successful and ambitious, however they decide
whichever way
to
they
do
want to
that,
do it.
right?
Yeah,
I think it's super important. So yeah, I mean, I think long story short, my mom would definitely be who I choose.
yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I would say a collection of all the women in my family,
Hmm.
and my mom for teaching me how to program.
Nice. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Beautiful.
My mom and I are like oil and water, but that, like, the funniest thing, I think it's because we're very much alike, like sort
It's
of
usually how
stubborn,
that works.
stubborn and very directional in our own way, right? And we go in very different directions. But
Right.
she taught me how to program, and my mom studied law, medicine, and engineering. Could not find a culture to fit into, and became a teacher instead,
Wow.
because
Wow.
there was like no support for her except for
Hmm.
in that environment. She became a really prolific teacher of mentally ill children, and children in
Hmm.
the juvenile justice system, and
Hmm.
children in psychiatric care, and things like that, which was really interesting. So it was interesting to watch her whole journey, where like when she was a fitness instructor, she was super accepted, right? Because that was like the 80s thing to do.
Right.
Um, But as soon as she tried to go into medicine or law or engineering, it was like, nope. I just saw the disappointment and the
Oh,
why is it not working out? And then, the conversations with both of my parents, where they just didn't want to talk about it. My dad was a cop, a black cop in a racist, crazy police department. Um, and things that he never, he would kind of say under his breath, right? Or talk about later. And then the same thing, my mom, things that she never wanted to talk about that now I understand a lot more clearly as an
mm-hmm,
adult.
mm-hmm.
And like why to this day she still doesn't want to talk about it. I want to talk about it all day.
Right.
And she's like, can you just stop talking about it? And I'm like, not
Yeah.
really.
They lived a version of it that was different.
Yeah,
Different.
yeah. And I know, and then I know that our generation, we're all about talking about it. Our
Right.
generation. So,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and then there's just this thing where the older generation, I admire them in a lot of ways because I understand it was like so horrific. So many things were so horrific. Like,
Yeah.
why keep talking about it? Like
Right.
you
Mm-hmm.
just gotta let it go and go on, right? And it's interesting now that we're talking about history and talking about the Oklahoma City massacres and all these different things that happened, the flooding of the black towns and the this and that, and then there's that movement of, oh, I thought you guys weren't talking about that. And now they're trying to, call it critical race theory or whatever. They're like, oh, we all agreed we weren't talking about that. That's not. It's like, no, we didn't agree.
Right.
We just did it because there was called fear, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I mean, it seems like you're really building upon that legacy of like, no, we're not going to be quiet. We're going to keep talking about it and supporting each other and make it
100%.
happen. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
For sure.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me and us virtually and sharing your story. And I know
No,
it
I
will go on
appreciate
to
it.
inspire others. I have plenty of people to share this video with.
Oh,
So thank you so much, and we look forward to supporting you in your new business. And tell us how to find you again.
sure. I am off social media for the most part, like personally. But once we move over to Mino on the first, you'll be able to find us at joinmino.com. That's MINO, join MINO.com. And our social media handles will be the same as well at join Mino.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.